There is a system of power that has been constructed where these companies and the people running these companies get to make decisions that affect billions of people's lives around the world, and those billions of people do not get any say in how it goes. And the industry is designed in a way that is extremely inhumane.
That is Karen Howell, one of the most respected AI journalists on the planet, who just spent years interviewing over 300 people, including 90 current or former OpenAI employees, for her new book, Empire of AI. What she uncovered is a picture of the AI industry that the people building it do not want you to see. Here is her full warning.
I think it's because they're driven by an imperial agenda, and that is why I call these companies empires of AI. Empire is the only metaphor that I've ever found to fully encapsulate all of the dimensions of what these companies do and the scale that they operate and what motivates them to do what they do. And there are many parallels that you see between what I call the empires of AI and the empires of old. They lay claim to resources that are not their own in the pursuit of training these models. That's the data of individuals, the intellectual property of artists, writers, and creators. They're land grabbing in order to build these supercomputer facilities for training the next generation models. Second, they exploit an extraordinary amount of labor. They contract hundreds of thousands of workers all around the world, including in the US, to ultimately make these technologies. We can talk about that more. And they also design their tools to be labor automating so that when the technologies are deployed, it also affects labor rights because it erodes away labor rights. And this is a political choice that they have. Third, they monopolize knowledge production, so they project this idea that they're the only ones that really understand how the technology works. And so if the public doesn't like it, it's because they don't actually know enough about this technology. They do this to the public, they do this to policymakers, and they've also captured the majority of the scientists that are working on understanding the limitations and capabilities of AI. They are, yeah. So if most of the climate scientists in the world were bankrolled by fossil fuel companies, do you think we would get an accurate picture of the climate crisis?
No.
And in the same way, they employ and bankroll, the AI industry employs and bankrolls most of the AI researchers in the world. So they set the agenda on AI research in soft ways, simply by funneling money to their priorities so that only certain types of AI research are produced. But they also will censor researchers when they do not like what the researcher has found. And so I talk about the case of Dr. Timnit Gebru in my book, who was the ethical AI team co-lead at Google when she was literally hired to critique the types of AI systems that Google was building. She then co-wrote a critical research paper that was showing how large language models specifically were leading to certain types of harmful outcomes. And in an attempt to try and stop this research from being published, Google ended up firing Gebru and then fired her other co-lead, Margaret Mitchell. And so they control and quash the research that is inconvenient to the empire's agenda.
So there is Karen Howell, who has spent 8 years covering the tech industry and interviewed over 300 people for this book, telling you that these companies operate like empires. They take your data, they exploit hundreds of thousands of workers, they fire their own researchers when the findings are inconvenient, and they have captured the majority of AI scientists on Earth, which means the public is getting a version of the truth that has been filtered through the interests of the companies that profit from it. But it goes further than just controlling research. OpenAI has started going after its critics directly, and the way they do it is straight out of an authoritarian playbook. Now listen to this.
This was, OpenAI started subpoenaing some of its critics, as part of what appears to be a campaign of intimidation, but also what appeared to be a campaign of fishing for more information to map out the network of critics further. But this was a man who runs a small watchdog nonprofit, and they had been doing a lot of work during that time to try and ask questions about OpenAI's attempt to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit. Ultimately, OpenAI was successful in that conversion, but during the period where it was sort of existential for OpenAI to complete this conversion. There were a lot of civil society groups and watchdog groups like Midas who were trying to prevent the process from happening in the dead of night. They were trying to get more transparency. They were trying to have more public debate about this because it's unprecedented. And it was then that there was a knock on his door and he was served papers. The papers asked him to reproduce every single piece of communication that he had that might have involved Musk. So this was like this strange paranoia that OpenAI had that Musk was somehow funding these people to block the conversion. None of them were actually funded by Musk.
So there is one of the most important AI companies on Earth subpoenaing a small nonprofit watchdog. A guy who runs a tiny civil society organization gets a knock on his door and is forced to hand over every piece of communication he has ever had. This is not a company that is confident in its mission. This is a company that is managing a narrative through intimidation. And the narrative they are managing is one of the most sophisticated pieces of mythology in modern business. Now listen to how Karen breaks down exactly how it works.
So this is so funny, is such a core part of the mythology that they create around the AI industry includes the belief that it could go very badly. It goes hand in hand. Like they need that part of the myth in order to then say, and that's why we need to be in control of the technology because that's the only way that it's going to go really, really well. And Altman has said publicly, the worst case, lights out for everyone. But best case, we cure cancer, we solve climate change, and there's abundance. And Dario Amodei, same kind of rhetoric. It's like worst case, catastrophic or existential harm for humanity. Best case, mass human flourishing. So this is like two sides of the same coin. Like they have to use both of these narratives in order to continue justifying an extremely anti-democratic approach to AI development where there should not be broad participation in developing this technology. They must be the ones controlling it at every step of the way.
So there is Karen explaining the playbook. Step 1, tell the public this technology could destroy the world. Step 2, tell the public that you are the only one who can prevent that. Step 3, use both narratives to justify total control while raising hundreds of billions of dollars. It is the oldest power play in history dressed up in Silicon Valley language. And what makes it more disturbing is what happens when you try to ask hard questions. Karen herself spent years trying to get OpenAI on the record. Now listen to this.
Because there's only 3 books coming out about him.
And he'd caught wind that your book was coming out and...
He knew my book was coming out because I had contacted OpenAI from the very beginning of my process and said, I'm working on a book now. Will you participate in it? And actually, initially they said yes. Even though, my history with OpenAI, I profiled the company for MIT Technology Review. I embedded within the office for 3 days in 2019. My profile comes out in 2020. The leadership are very unhappy. And in my book, I actually quote an email that I received that Sam Altman sent to the company about my profile saying, yeah, this is not great. And from then on, the company's stance to me was, we are not going to participate in anything that you do. We are not going to respond to any questions that you receive. And this was, this was things that they explicitly articulated. It wasn't like me inferring. So I had a colleague at MIT Technology Review that also covered AI. And at one point, OpenAI sent him this press release being like, we would love for you to cover this story. And he was like, I'm really busy. Will you send it to Karen? And they were like, oh no. We have a history, you understand.
So there is the most powerful AI company on Earth blacklisting one of the most respected journalists in the field because she wrote a profile they did not like. Sam Altman himself sent an internal email about her work, and from that moment forward, she could not get a single answer to a single question. The phrase they used to her colleague says it all. Oh no, we have a history, you understand, but the people who left OpenAI tell an even darker story. The co-founder, the CTO, every senior leader who disagreed with Altman. They all walked out. And what they did next is the loudest possible statement about what they believe is happening inside that company. Now listen to this.
There's a quote in your book on page 357 where you say about Ilya saying, "I don't think Sam is the guy who should have the finger on the button for AGI."
And it wasn't just Ilya. Mira Murati then also said, "I don't think Altman is the right guy."
And then they both left later.
So then Altman comes back, and lo and behold, Ilya never comes back. So his concerns about the fact that Altman finding out would be bad for him manifested. He ended up not coming back, and Mira Murati then left shortly thereafter. If you consider one of the origin stories of OpenAI is this dinner that happened at the Rosewood Hotel, which is a very swanky hotel right in the heart of Silicon Valley that was one of Elon Musk's favorites whenever he was coming up from LA to the Bay Area. And there was this dinner that was there where Altman was intending to recruit the OG team that would start OpenAI. So he's kind of telling everyone, you might have a chance to meet Musk because Musk is going to come to this dinner, and he cold emails Ilya and gets Ilya to then come and Ilya specifically wants to come because he wants to meet Musk. And he also emails all these other people, including Greg Brockman, Dario Amodei.
These are all people that ended up working at OpenAI.
And they all, almost all of them, not every one of them, but almost all of them end up working at OpenAI.
And leaving.
Almost all of them end up leaving, specifically after they clash with Altman.
And Ilya, he left and launched a company called Safe Superintelligence.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's an indirect if I've ever heard one. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? If someone like co-founded this podcast with me and then they left and started a podcast called Safe Podcasting, I'd take that as a slight.
One of the things that is happening here is it is not a coincidence that every single tech billionaire has their own AI company.
Mm-hmm.
They want to create AI in their own image. And that's why they keep not getting along. And in fact, it's not just don't get along, they end up hating each other after working together.
Mm-hmm.
And then splinter off into their own organizations. So after Musk leaves, he starts XAI. After Dario leaves, he starts Anthropic. After Ilya leaves, he starts Safe Superintelligence. After Mira leaves, she starts Thinking Machines Lab. They want to have control over their own vision of this technology.
So there is the full picture of what happened inside OpenAI. The co-founder said Altman should not have the finger on the button for AGI. The CTO agreed. Both were pushed out. The Rosewood dinner that started the whole company also started a slow motion exodus because almost every person at that dinner ended up leaving and starting a competing company. Ilya named his Safe Superintelligence. That is not subtle. That is a public statement about what he believes OpenAI is not. And after all of this, Karen comes back to the one point that should stay with everyone watching. The problem is not the people. The problem is the structure. Now listen to this.
Because to me, even if you were to swap all of the CEOs for someone that people would say is better at running these companies, it doesn't fix the problem that I identify in the book, which is that there is a system of power that has been constructed where these companies and the people running these companies get to make decisions that affect billions of people's lives around the world, and those billions of people do not get any say in how it goes.
So there is Karen Howe, who interviewed over 300 people, including 90 from inside OpenAI, telling you that it does not matter who sits in the CEO chair. The problem is structural. A handful of people are making decisions that will affect billions of lives, and those billions of people have no seat at the table. The co-founder said Altman should not have the finger on the button for AGI and was pushed out. The CTO agreed and was pushed out. Every senior leader who disagreed left and started a competitor. The company subpoenas its critics, blacklists journalists, and uses a mythology designed to concentrate power, not distribute it. A handful of people are asking for total control over a technology that will reshape every job, every industry, and every government on Earth. And they are asking you to trust them with it, with no vote, no input, no recourse if they get it wrong. If this opened your eyes, make sure you are subscribed because the conversation about who controls AI is only going to get more important from here.